So we don't really understand a lot about happiness. I think we really don't. We think we do, but we don't. But that's one thing that I think it's for people to realize it's okay to feel sad and depressed. That's natural. It's common. It's way more, especially in the pandemic, it's way more common than people realize. And entrepreneurs feel it. I feel burned out every once in a while or frequently. People on my team, like a third of my company probably feels that. Like, join the club.
Welcome to the Bulletproof Cashflow podcast. Let's get into the show.
Hey everyone, this is Augustino. Behind the art of capital raising is sales. This means you need to be great at building your own processes for reaching out to potential investors, but also have the ability to scale your internal group to reach more people. Well, today's guest understands this as he is an expert at driving growth, building successful outbound teams, and increasing productivity. Before starting his own company, he worked at Salesforce, where he built a new teleprospecting inside sales team and process from scratch and sourced $100 million in recurring revenue for the company. Now he's turned his attention to building a software platform that will power the next wave of cold calling teams. He is the co-author of From Impossible to Inevitable and Predictive Revenue, a book that discusses the sales systems that helped companies like Salesforce.com and Twilio create billions of dollars in revenue. Now, as a highly ranked international speaker, he is known for combining his big picture great breakthroughs and inspirational ideas with giving audiences tactical takeaways. His speaking topics include scalable sales teams, creative predictable revenue, and growth and innovation. So we're definitely excited to have him on. Now, with all that, I'd like to welcome Aaron Ross to our show. Aaron, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, happy to be here, Agostino. Thanks for the intro.
Yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to be awesome, though. I've been looking forward to this for a while. Now, if you like what Aaron has to say, you can reach him via his contact page at predictablerevenue.com. And if you like our content, please don't forget to leave a comment and rate the show. It helps us out tremendously when you do. Finally, if you text the word freedom to 202-410-4202, get our free ebook, The Bulletproof Guide to Finding a Broker. Okay, Aaron, go ahead and tell listeners a little bit more about you and how you got your start in the sales game.
Well, I think I'm with, and by the way, yeah, I'm sure you might hear some sounds background like other people. I got 9 kids. It's another fun fact. So sales is not just something interesting skill, but it's also a necessity. You have a big family and you have to make money. I actually started out when I was younger as an engineer by nature. I went to engineering. I did programming in high school and engineering at college at Stanford. And it wasn't until I started a business and basically it went out of business that I realized, well, I'd sold before, like I'd done some small businesses and things, but I had never learned how to build a repeatable, professional sales team. Like I hadn't done that. And so I went to hey, one of the best ways to learn is actually get a job where you are getting paid to learn. All right. You can do courses, lots of ways to learn. The best way to do it is to do it. So I got a job at Salesforce.com back when it was about 150 people, a long time ago, early 2000s, basically answering the 800 line. So I had and went from a CEO of a venture-funded internet company to the junior person on the totem pole on the sales line, because I just wanted to learn how did sales work when you are a professional at it, and that was the start of it. And since then, what I would tell people is that sales is a life skill. You can't be successful or accomplish things in life without being able to sell yourself a product or an idea. Okay? So it's not something that is like, I get if you, I don't want to do sales, I don't want to have to sell or market. It's a skill that you need to be successful, even if you're going to raise money for a nonprofit. It doesn't matter what you do. So it's a life skill. It's something that also involves taking multiple steps. So I'm assuming for the people who might be newer to this and building a business in real estate and making money, those are just a couple of starting points. Selling is not one meeting. It's not one call. You have to be ready to take several steps for each investor or each property or each situation and treat it like a multi-step process. It doesn't have to be complicated, but it's something that you need to know. It's like guitar. Like if you may not be born a natural guitar player, but if you find a teacher or a book or an online video and you practice enough, you'll get much better at it. And sales is the same thing. Making money is the same thing.
It requires practice. Practice.
Yeah, practice, yeah. And the desire to get better at that skill.
That's right. Now, do you find, before we get into the whole deeper into the sales thing, do you find that there's a negative connotation when it comes to sales, like a negative, I don't know, stereotype around it, perhaps something like that? Is that why people just really shy away from it? Like, why do you think that is?
I think a lot of people do. There's also a lack of appreciation for the value of selling. So I think until you've been in business, it's something where you don't really realize how vital it is, how important it is, until you have needed it and you didn't have that skill.
Yeah.
So like a lot of the fastest growing companies in the world have very professional, capable sales organizations, right? And a lot of companies, you don't have to have it based on the business, but it is an asset. It's something that's very valuable when you do it well, and you can do it in a way that's good. The right way to do sales is where both parties win, right? The person you're selling gets what they need. If it's an investor, right, they have an opportunity to make money, and if you're selling something, you get what you need, which could be funds or the opportunity or the deal, right? That's the best kind of selling, right? It's based on trust and honesty and both parties winning, not based on like what you don't want to do and you are doing it wrong, feel like you have to hide things, lie, steal, manipulate, or otherwise trick people into getting into a deal.
Right. I think that's probably where the negative stuff comes in, is because there's been that whole stereotype of, I think the sleazy auto sales guy is probably the most prevalent
Yeah.
one, right?
Yep.
And it's like, I think we've seen plenty of sitcoms where somebody buys a lemon off the car lot, they drive it a mile, next thing you know, it starts falling apart. And
Yeah, and how many
that's where it
people
comes
grow up?
from.
Yeah, when you're young, it's like who wants to? You never. What's a sale? What is sales? You don't even hear about it, learn about it till you're older. Usually, it's
Right.
not something you're interested in. Business for me was always just ephemeral. Like my father was an entrepreneur, but it was always this like thing I didn't understand. It's like something. So it wasn't until I was in it, and then again, either struggling or didn't know what it really meant, where I really appreciate the value of, uh, what an essential skill it is for anyone who wants to not even be an entrepreneur. Because even if you're in a job and you want to sell internally, like convince people you have a great idea. It's one thing to have a great idea. It's another to get other people on board to help you support that idea. That's
Right.
a version of selling or marketing.
That's right. That's right. Well, I mean, hey, even for me, even when I was working as a CIO, working in corporate America, I didn't even consider sales as a thing. It's kind of like I viewed more marketing, internal marketing, than sales more than anything. But those are two very different things. Very different
Yeah.
things.
And again, for the right business, sales can be an amazing accelerator or enabler to the business making money. And just one other thing, a lot of customers, not all, but there's a lot of customers who need help buying. Right? They like it's an overwhelming world. There's a lot of stuff out there. What they're looking for is often like someone who can kind of guide them towards the right opportunities and the right um, direction for their business. So if you can be that person who over time, you don't start out this way, you become an expert, you know what you're doing, you have confidence in yourself and what you're offering, and you realize that a lot of the customers need your help and your direction so that they feel like they know what they're going to do. Like a lot of customers most need help buying and making those like narrowing the options down into what they're going to do with their money, their properties, or their businesses.
Yeah.
Again, so
Yeah.
that's where that honesty and the trust and the desire for customer success comes in, and the balanced way, customer success as well as your success, because it's very common people don't value themselves. They undervalue what they do. They undersell, over deliver, because it's a insecurity about their own value. So that's another thing that can be established over time is like knowing your worth, learning how to say no to the wrong deal, to the wrong customer, learning how to kind of challenge when you're talking to a customer. And again, when I say customer, it could be it could be investor, it could be anyone, but it's learning when to challenge them to that they aren't looking at it the way that they should be, like for their own best interests, and
Yeah.
not just always saying yes.
No, I love it. I love it. One thing that comes to mind when you said that is overpromise and overdeliver instead
Yeah.
of underdeliver, underpromise, overdeliver. Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah, overpromise, overdeliver. That's one motto that I always go by. But well, something that Aaron that I started doing a long time ago was along that same train of thought. There is to establish myself as a subject matter expert in our space in the world of real estate, of course, and getting out there and really make myself known, talk to investors, talk to brokers, get in front of the right people that can connect, so I can connect the deals with the money, basically, right? Now, and of course, that's just one aspect of in terms of everything from doing YouTube to podcasting to doing the videos and all that stuff. But when it comes to actual the sales metrics around things, like what sort of sales metrics would people really should they be tracking to really determine how successful they're going, and not to mention too to sort of track to their end goal, I guess, right? Like what sort of things should we be looking at?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think everyone's a little bit different, but generally what you're looking for is, um, and it's usually once you've had a few deals, right? You can look back, okay, what were the steps that we took? Where do they come from? So there's kind of two general types of deals. There's the ones that find you through word of mouth, organic, and again, you know people, you're building relationships, that people like you, and they come that way. You don't have a lot of control over that necessarily. So what happens there? Was there a first meeting? So typically in sales, there's like a first kind of are we a fit meeting, right?
Mm.
Who are you? What do you do? Is there worth spending more time on this? That's generally step one. How many of those meetings do you do or phone calls? Step two would be like a deeper dive, right? Like you call it demo, discovery. Let's spend probably like an hour together. Like, tell me about your business. Tell me what you're looking for. Maybe it's half hour, but it's like a deeper dive to really get to the point where you know how to generate a proposal. And so again, there could be some more steps. The simpler version would be like proposal, negotiate, close. And then one step that people forget about is implement or launch, right? Because you really want to focus on not just the deal, it's customer success. So making your business successful, making the customer successful, signing the papers is just one step, but not the last step. And you're not done at that point. So kind of looking at, hey, what did you do when you've had wins? What were some of the steps you followed? And when things didn't work out, like what were some of the steps? And trying to gauge what are a few key metrics that make sense to you that you can kind of gauge on. So that might be, for some people, that might be sending like LinkedIn notes. For other people, it might be how many uh, cold calls or cold emails they send. For others, it might be just how many first meetings they have. So everyone's a little bit different. But you're looking for is some like some activity. What activity can I do? And if I do 20 of those, will that get me 5 of the next activity? And if I do 5 of those, how many can I get a deal? So I didn't complete one thought. I said one type of deal is the ones where you're kind of word of mouth. The other type is if you can do something that goes to generate a deal, right? So again, that might be Facebook ads, it might be cold calls, it might be coffee meetings. It's kind of like a proactive way to go out and like get business. It might be going to trade shows, events, or virtual conferences. I don't know, Reddit forums. But it's kind of where you can go and say, if I did X, I did 100, of one thing, and then from that I got some number of initial emails or phone calls, and from that I got an initial number of proposals, and so on. So either way, you're trying to step back and look at what did you do, and how did each step lead to the next, and you're just trying to take your best estimate. Like you have to usually, if you have a business that's more like a million or two in revenue, you can start to get to more of like a predictable system. But you're just starting to say, hey, I'm not just flailing around. Like, what are some of all the 50 things I did this week? What 5 of them seem like they actually made a difference, and how can I do more of them? And what seemed to waste my time?
I mean, this involves a high degree of being very critical of yourself too, because I mean, you're describing it like the sales funnel, basically, right? You make X number of calls and take it all down, all the way down. Like 10 calls, so you're starting off with, you're ending with one sale for whatever it might be, or one
Yeah,
investor, whatever it might be.
yeah.
I don't know. Do you find that many people they get hung up on the very first step? I mean, they're afraid to make that initial phone call. They're afraid to get in front of somebody and actually talk it out. Is that where would you say the biggest hang up
Yeah,
is for most people?
yeah, for sure. It's taking the first steps. Like it's that
Yeah.
starting point. And that's true of everyone. Like the first time you are gonna, play guitar maybe or business, but for sure, because there's all the fear, anxiety, and doubt that are there. And if you're an experienced entrepreneur, it's like if you do one, then it's easier to do the next few. So it's like those first few that are hardest part. And if you are starting out, if you're new, like the best thing you could do is go out and okay, listen to podcasts, great. And then like, do you know anyone who's tried this? Can you go just talk to people, uh, whether you do your own interviews or whether you just try to go out and have virtual coffees or real coffees or ways to go out and meet people just to learn. Um, and then the next step So it's like you can watch videos, but then you got to like take some steps. And the final step is how can you got to find a way to put yourself in the job to do it. How can you force yourself to do it? And for me, getting a job in sales forced me to learn sales. It was a
Yeah.
way to get paid to learn. If you're, so what can you do to basically make sure that you have no avenue of retreat, that your fear, uncertainty, and doubt, you have to push through it versus kind of stay stuck in your old habits and not and be um like at the starting part is the hardest part.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think part of it though, too, one thing that I recommend to people, especially ones that are starting out too, is try to deliver some sort of value to that person. So don't walk into a meeting. Well, I guess go into a meeting, of course, knowing that your outcomes to try to help them achieve something, so you can demonstrate value and put you in a better position. I think the first thing that you said in that very first step, which I thought was very interesting, is, "Are we a good fit?" And the way you become a good fit is to demonstrate value, right? Which you should always be doing, right? In my opinion.
Yeah, it's demonstrating value and also finding out, and it doesn't happen in your first deal, but after a few, which is how do I know? Like when you're first starting out, you don't really know it's a great fit. You can take your best guess. But then once you get a few deals, customers, or steps along, you start to know, oh, okay, this type of deal went really well because of Y. And this other type of deal went really badly and Y. And this other deal was kind of like, kind of just in the middle and Y. And like, what are the differences? And it takes a lot of typically practice and courage to develop its the journey of getting enough customers and data points to kind of have clarity on those ideal customers and to focus on those ideal customers and to say no to the ones that you might be able to close a deal, but it ends up just being more of a drain on you and a bigger risk than you really want or are ready for.
Right. It'll be the hardest commission you never
Yeah,
earn.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 And everyone's
Now,
been in places where you just scrambling, got to get the next check in, and you're just going from one to the next, and that's okay. Again, it's a learning opportunity, right? You're not failing as long as you learn from it.
right. Absolutely. So a big part of this the sales game is also lead gen, right?
Yep.
So I know you talked a little bit about the sales funnel here. Now, how do you structure your lead gen and the closing funnel? Like, do you have a certain structure you may want to share?
Well, for different, so there's like three types of leads that really are important, right? There's word of mouth, which I call seeds. There's marketing, which I call nets, and spears, which is outbound prospecting. Seeds, nets, and spears. So for most, if you have a product-based business, it's kind of one of these things where if you have something that's easy to explain, then it's easier to market through outbound prospecting, typically. If you have something that's hard to explain, you need to stick more towards kind of relationship based marketing or like content marketing. So I think part of it depends on the business, really, what kind of lead generation is going to work for you. I would always start with the people you know, right? And because it's like having conversations and talking to people is a way to kind of help you get clear on what you want to do, your value, and the next steps. So whenever in doubt, just reach out and talk to people, ask for help. It takes a lot more courage to ask for help than it does to offer help. So
Hmm.
if you're, again, it could be even comments in a podcast. There's lots of people out there who are going to be experts or further along in your space than you are, and most of them are. There's going to be so many that are open to talking to you and giving advice to anyone because they just like to do that. That's more people would be open to doing that. So I think like when my daughter, I have a 20-year-old and she wants to start a business. She wants to start like say a esthetician or a nail salon. Like, well, the best thing to do is to go work in a nail salon. Or if you want to start a restaurant, go work in a restaurant. If you want to learn how to do real estate investing, go see if you can get a job helping a real estate investor. Right. So that's one step is don't be afraid to go talk to people, whether it's like more of interview format or to try to get intern or a job for them to learn the craft. Because in most crafts, it's kind of like almost any business is this, think about the arts, right? There's probably 1% of artists make a lot of money and 99% make some to struggle. But that's true of every profession, sports, sales. Um, so you have to be prepared if you really want to do this. It's going to take longer than you want. And like, how can you focus on learning the craft to get really good at it? And which could be the sales craft as well as the real estate craft before you start to, I guess, judge yourself for failing. Like it could be years It's usually years.
And that's probably the toughest part is that people I find are very they're very how should I say
Impatient.
not they're not patient. Yeah, they're very impatient. Very impatient. Yeah, I mean it's the same thing with the real estate game. It's in our world we're going off and we're buying many deals, and it isn't like don't live on the beach yet, not driving around the Ferrari. It takes a little time, right? But I think I wonder if that comes from media or if it comes from just a false sense of as soon as you're going to get one deal, you're going to be a multimillionaire and you're going to buy a villa right in Florida. I think
Yeah.
I don't know where this comes from. I have no idea where this comes from.
Well,
Right?
yeah, no, it's partly social media,
Yeah.
which it speeds it up. It's partly desperation, right?
Yeah.
It's people who
Yeah.
just want something different. And I think social media, it's always been around. Like in the past, it was magazine ads, it was newspaper ads, it was radio ads, like make money this way. I remember as a kid, a teenager, seeing, back of Popular Mechanics magazine, was it, mail order businesses, right? That was the original version of e-commerce.
I remember
And I remember like
that.
wanting to make, money, be able to buy a car, and so I've been around. It's just social media accelerates it because we're surrounded by stories of people who made money fast, who, and also there's all the gurus, or some people say there's lots of dark gurus who are like sell courses, and a lot of them, and there's lots of great people selling courses who want to help people, and there's other people who want to sell courses just a way to extract as much money as possible from people.
Yeah.
Right. So we're surrounded by all this. Like you're not making enough money. You're not good enough. You're falling behind. Plus a combination of people who need to pay rent and they're desperate, and so it's a potent cocktail in our society today.
Yeah. Interesting. We can probably have a whole show just about that, actually.
Yeah. It's the same thing in the SaaS world, right? That's a little more my specialty. Is everyone sees these stories. Someone creates a product and in 6 months, in 12 months, 18 months, sells it for $5 million or $500 million, and then so that happens for, I don't know if it's one out of 1,000 companies. I'm just making that up, but there's a news story about it, and then everyone sees it like, oh, like why can't I do that? Or I
Right.
want to do that. I'm gonna try that. Or why didn't I do that? And the reality is, most of the grind of building a business is pretty boring. It's like a 2 years to get something off the ground before you even know it's going to work or not, and it's like a 5 to 10 year journey to exit of some kind. That's more typical.
Right. It's also a high level of risk as well. I mean, most people don't see or understand the high level of risk. They just look at a guy like Jeff Bezos, for instance. He quit Wall Street and he just went off and started a company. Now he's a billionaire. It doesn't work that way. It
I
took
mean,
years.
it's a lot. Yeah, it takes a lot of guts for most people, and it takes longer than you think. And I mean, there are some naturals, but most people, and I put myself in this camp, are not natural. Like I learned the craft. I needed to do it, and for me, like especially having kids and having lots of kids, is like forced me to even go further towards how to learn how to make money and build businesses. And why? And I mean, it's interesting. So not only do I need to build my business, nowadays it's about a multi-million dollar sort of sales outsourcing and sales training company. But it's also, a lot of what we do is work with other businesses to understand more in the tech space, like B2B space, like why are they stuck or not. So I never imagined when I was younger I would be doing this, being like a sales thought leader, like growth thought leader. So it's kind of, it is weird sometimes, kind of do what I do, but it's interesting. And what I think people don't realize is how many repeatable patterns there are in why companies succeed and why they don't succeed, why
Yeah.
some people succeed and why they don't succeed. Um, I don't even say succeed. I think it's why some people can reach the levels they want to reach. It always takes longer than they want, and other people can just struggle in the same place, and they just feel like they're in neutral. And companies the same way. It's like, how do you get out of your rut? How do you break that plateau? The habits you have. A lot of it's about how do you break your habits.
That is actually quite powerful right there. I think that's the big difference is I think that many people, number one, they get inside their own head. And number two, they don't surround themselves with other people that are successful at the craft. I mean, I think that number two is probably even more important than number one. I mean, it's not surrounding yourself with other people that are good at sales or they're good at real estate or good at whatever it is that you're trying to become a master at. You're putting yourself in a bad position because you're pretty much stuck with your own thoughts in your own room trying to figure out how to make something work, and it just doesn't work that
Yeah,
way.
and often like complaining and whining and frustrated about about yourself or other people, and that's okay. Everyone does that, but it's one thing to do that, and then how do you kind of like take a step to unstick yourself and realize, okay, what can I do? Yeah, my spouse, my partner, my friend, my client, my this, my family. Okay, but what can I do? What's one step I could do? Like I really like the power of baby steps is so amazing if you just can take one little step and just keep doing that. And someday they just add up. And you look back like, wow, like what happened? But I think
Yeah.
a lot of people are scared of, well, what that little step, like making a list of business ideas, that's not going to do anything. I'm not going to bother with that. And making that one call, that's not going to do anything. But it's like every little step, like that's the key. One of the keys to success I really believe in is like baby steps.
Yeah. Now, do you go over this kind of stuff in your material?
Not at this point. I mean, I had something. I did a bunch of courses about 10 years ago called Unique Genius, and I thought about redoing that book at some point. Most of my books are really focused on how do you take a business that has something already, so you have some kind of product or some kind of offering, and then make a lot more money with it. There's a if you don't have a product or company yet, obviously there's real. I'm not an expert in real estate, but there's a book called that a guy named Peter Thiel wrote called Zero to One.
Mm,
It's more
yeah.
for tech entrepreneurs. I actually haven't read it, buddy, and he's well-known guru in the tech space and how to get from nothing to something. And so my books are really how do you have something to a lot more of something.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, there is one part so there's two books. One's called From Impossible to Inevitable, and there's in the middle there's a chapter called The Journey, Do the Time, and that is really about it takes years longer than you want. And there's ups and downs. There's the emotional journey. um, it's been well documented, and it's not a surprise where people go through these peaks and valleys around it. They get super excited, and then things happen, and it's like you're depressed and horrible, and it's like this roller coaster. And entrepreneurs tend to be more, I don't know, they tend to have non-standard brains on average. Whether you call them bipolar or anxiety, depressive, all sorts of stuff. But entrepreneurs tend to have brains that don't work, on the normal as whatever you call normal as other people. And so it tends to be more of an emotional roller coaster, and that's not bad. That's just so like everyone goes through that. Jeff Bezos went through that. I'm sure he still goes through that. Like you're not doing
Well,
anything wrong if you feel depressed. You feel if something's wrong if you feel depressed and nothing changes and you're not working to change it at some point. Then if you give up, that's the only place you can really fail.
that's right. Well, depression is actually it's not always a bad thing.
No.
It means that there's something that has to change in your life, and it's the same way you get an itch or you get some pain in your thumb or whatever. It's how you know there's something that needs to change because you're getting some damage there, right? That's what
Yeah.
depression is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who, depression is also just kind of a factor of their life. It'll come and go. Part of that creative, I don't think they understand why a lot of the most creative people just tend to have more things like depression. Just like the way the brains are work. More creativity tends to equal more other stuff, like to balance it out. Some people in our family have depression, and I don't, again, it doesn't seem like there's something they can ever cure. I would be shocked if it isn't something they live that doesn't come and go for their entire lives in some way. It might be more prominent in like teens or 20s. Like there's certain times in your life where when they do studies, like people are just less happy. It's a generational like age thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just kind of the way some people are more wired, and it's not bad. Like it's not natural. It's not healthy to actually be happy all the time. That's not our thing. Like you need to
Absolutely.
people, yeah, people. Everyone has a range of emotions, and I think they're starting to realize now that like a lot of the most successful, happiest people have like a range of emotions. Like it's kind of like a variety of emotions is what helps you feel better about your life. Kind of like in health, if you ate was spinach every day all day, like that wouldn't be very healthy. Like a variety of things. Um, so we don't really understand a lot about happiness. I think we really don't. We think we do, but we don't. But that's one thing that I think for people to realize it's okay to feel sad and depressed. That's natural. It's common. It's way more, especially in the pandemic. It's way more common than people realize. And entrepreneurs feel it. I feel burned out every once in a while or frequently. People on my team, like a third of my company, probably feels that. like join the club. You're not failing just because you feel shitty. I think where you're failing is, even if you can just, what kind of step can you take, even no matter how small it is? And sometimes that step might be just like resting. It's like, okay, just not giving up. That's a lot of the key.
Sometimes you could even be writing out your goals. I mean, that's what I do. Whenever I get a little bit depressed, I sit down, I write out my goals to kind of remind me why I'm doing what I do. Right.
Yeah.
So
everyone's got
there's
their
that.
thing,
Yep. So now, Aaron, if someone's listening out there right now and they're they're wondering what to do, what their next step should be, what sort of bulletproof advice would you give that person?
In the bulletproof advice, I think ultimately would just be, to go talk to someone, like go talk to anyone. So if all you can do is like talk to a friend, start. I mean, if you're at the point where you're really trying to get better at your business, go talk to people who give you prospects, mentors, partners. Like talking to people just helps things move. It just keeps things flowing, like conversation. Um, I give the same advice, in the pandemic when there's like VPS sales executives who are like, what do I do with my sales teams? Like, go talk to people, like go talk to your team, go talk to your, like that really is often the key to help things, move along. If you're in doubt, go talk to someone.
Yeah. Very valuable advice. I'm going to use it myself today.
I know. Some of the, yeah. I mean, sometimes the best advice is just, it can be that simple. It doesn't have to be fancy.
Right. I love it. All right. Well, guys, if you want to reach out to Aaron, you can reach him via his website at predictablerevenue.com. I hope you got some insight on how to improve your overall sales chops. Because this is a sales game here, guys. You really got to know it, and definitely check out his material. Check out Aaron's material. He's got great stuff. Okay. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the Bulletproof Cashflow podcast.